Welcome to the last session of Beyond the Treatment Table for 2025. I am Stephanie Talabasa, your host for today's practice owner panel with Nisha Wetzel from Advanced Physical Therapy Solutions in North Carolina, Jesse Klein from Willow Pelvic Health in New Jersey, New York, Drew Morgan from McMaster Physical Therapy in Arkansas, and our format today is going to be a recap of all the topics for the year. So my plan is to ask our guests to one or two questions from each topic so that we can see a wide variety of all the ways to do things right in business. We have people from different states, specialties, very different sizes and business models. So I think we're going to have a really good variety. Let's start with some intros in the chat. And just a reminder, if you're not driving or you're comfortable eating lunch while you're on here, just turn your cameras on. Hi, Britt. Turn your cameras on and be active in the chat with us. So our question to start with is going to be your practice name, location, and the topic that you're most excited to hear about from the year. So that could be human resources, everyone's favorite, marketing, leadership, payment, negotiation. That was a fun one. I will start with mine. My topics are always marketing leadership. That's my favorite. So if everyone could just throw their answers in the chat. And then while we're doing that, a few reminders. There'll be a survey that will pop up at the end, last couple minutes. We are actively planning 2026, so those surveys are going to be really helpful right now. And our goal is for 2026 to have this be a standing session, and it's just a recurring meeting on everyone's calendar, the fourth Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern, and we come together, share our experience, and have a really healthy discussion. So let's start. Nisha, why don't you tell us your favorite topic that you're ready to get into?
My favorite topic of the year was the payment and contracting, and has actually spurred us to go out of network with some Medicare Advantage plans based on some of the kind of guidance from Kelly Sanders. So that was my favorite one.
Jesse?
I think my favorite from the year was the marketing and social media one. I think it just spurred a lot of ideas for me and was something that I felt was very achievable to do like right off the bat. And it was fun too.
That one was fun. Drew, what was your favorite?
I like talking all things marketing because I feel like it's such a struggle bus item, and I pick something up from every marketing talk.
All right, so we've got the marketing bias here. Craig in the chat said leadership and operations, and Dawn payment and leadership. Cool. First time joining. Welcome, Cole. All right, let's do some quick introductions. So, Jesse, why don't you tell us a little bit about your business and about your model?
Okay, well, I get to go first. So my name is Jessie Klein. I am a physical therapist specializing in pelvic floor therapy. My practice is called Willow Pelvic Health. I started this practice about 3 years ago, and it's evolved significantly since then, which I'm sure we'll get into throughout our discussion today. We are a cash-based practice, and we provide super bills to our patients for out-of-network reimbursement. We're based in New York and New Jersey. So did I miss anything?
No, that's perfect. Drew?
So my name is Drew Morgan. I'm at McMaster Physical Therapy Clinic in Conway, Arkansas. We are part of a network of 6 clinics, so I'm a minority owner in my division. So I function with other business partners, manage a clinic, and have ownership. I have 6 therapists at my location, 9,000 square feet with a pool. If anybody's thinking about building a pool, don't before you call me. Let's have a real talk. But yeah, about 10 years of ownership. Learned through bumps and bruises along the way.
I don't know if I could fit a pool in my space. It would be more like a bathtub. Nisha, what about you?
I'm Nisha Wetzel. I am a minority partner as well in my practice. We're Advanced Physical Therapy Solutions, and we are in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is about an hour south of Raleigh. We're just outside of the Fort Bragg Army base. I started out as staff in a already existing clinic and had the opportunity to buy in as a minority partner in 2020, so about 6 years on for me. We have two clinics. We have 20 clinicians total. That's including myself and my business partner. A little more traditional model as far as we do take insurance. We have a few cash-based services, but sort of function as a multi-niche clinic. So we do some pelvic health, infant torticollis, scoliosis, some neuro, some ortho, TMD. So a couple little, we refer to it as sort of a clinic within a clinic and helping clinicians sort of build their practice within ours.
That's a really cool setup. And I know when I was looking at your website, you have a lot of board specialists also. Okay, first topic of 2025 was strategic planning. So Brent was our first guest expert, and he was talking specifically about bringing on minority owners. So I think we're going to start with Drew here, since you're coming up on 10 years, or just past 10 years, sorry. Can you take us through what your strategic planning looks like with your partners?
Yeah, I think it's always interesting. I haven't met the person that said I began with strategic planning in mind, right? We'll find our way to this and figure it out as we go. We do have a parent company about 50 miles away, and that guy's, I'd say he's got figuratively a little more gray hair than I do. And so we've got a few within the company that have significantly more gray hair than each of us. So it's a new thing in the last year to have quite a few conversations about what that looks like. How do you make transitions? I would say the strategic planning first thing is the foundational documents that you have that guide your operation to begin with are huge, and it's rarely talked about in strategic planning until you're thinking about retiring. But we have great foundational documents, and then almost like we do with our employees, I'm seeing it in the broader company of when we bring on an employee, it's what do you want out of your career? With the different therapists, owners that have more years on them, it's what do you want with your exit? And how do we make that a win-win for both sides? So I would say more quarterly conversations are happening about that on what works for both sides, how we move in that direction. And we're probably 6 years away from the first exit at minimum. So we're trying to get all that in order as we go.
Nisha, was it similar for you?
Yeah, sort of fortunate and unfortunate. My business partner and I are almost polar opposites of each other. So when it's working well, it's working really well because we each complement each other in the areas the other is lacking. We also work with a consulting group, and so that kind of helped us really facilitate the buy-in, and then helped us do some just some leadership development for us, and helped us kind of learn how to really work together. Helped us develop a little more leadership development in working with our staff, and that was more specific to me, and help us with some financial management and budgeting and things like that. So we meet quarterly and identify potential barriers to maybe reasons we didn't meet our goals from the previous quarter. We try to establish some new sort of wigs for the next quarter. And then we still work with our consulting group on a quarterly basis as well to just help us identify any blind spots on things we may just not be paying as much attention to.
So regular conversations.
Very much.
Jesse, I'm assuming it's going to look a little different for you. Did you open with a formal written plan? And I'm more curious how your perspective on the practice growth changed from starting 3 years ago to where you are now.
Yeah, so I did not start with a formal plan. I was still quite junior in my career. I'd only been practicing for about 5.5 years when I decided to make the jump. And when I did, I also took on a part-time job and started my practice part-time. And I didn't have it in my mind that I would fail. I thought I would succeed, but I didn't necessarily want to invest too much time and effort in case I decided that business ownership wasn't for me. But as my business evolved, as it grew, as I was more and more determined to grow, just being solo, I did need to work on standardizing my procedures, having manuals, writing things down. And so as I began to do those things, it certainly helped me with the growth and the vision of my practice moving forward and has allowed me to standardize things for, an employee or what things will look like years down the road as opposed to months down the road.
I think another thing to kind of point out is your big clinic build out that just happened in the fall. I think that potentially leads into some things needing to be more formal.
Oh, definitely. So it wasn't just renting out space here and there. And now I have a full space with multiple treatment rooms and a gym space that's my own. So I think that just lends itself to a more traditional operation with employees and patients coming in and out rather than more of like a side hustle.
Any questions for the minority ownership piece or going solo to a standalone clinic? Cole, I'm going to pick on you since it's your first day.
Uh, no, I'm in a little bit more traditional practice here, so kind of joined into the director of a clinic, and then will join as a partner next year. So similar, a little bit more similar to Drew's approaches sound like from my takeaway.
All right, we're moving into the number one topic of the year, human resources. We're going to keep it really short so no one falls asleep. Do you manage your HR in-house or do you outsource it? And Drew, you can go first.
So I'd call it hybrid. We've got what I call the mothership in Russellville, and they do, payroll and things like that. But every owner at all 6 clinic sites wears the hat of HR in front of everybody. We also drive the culture. So, right before this call, there was a HSA question. Hey, I joined the insurance 2 months ago. I hadn't seen my card yet. And so I'm firing off an email right before this to Russellville on how to help him get his card. So a hybrid model, but it's all in-house.
Nisha?
I have been the HR department. I'd love to say I'm as organized as Jesse and having a lot of standardized things and a lot of things written down. Usually a fire will happen and then I realize I probably need a policy for that. And then I go back and edit my policy and procedure manual every single year to edit and add some new things that have just happened. So it's been primarily me. I'm garbage at delegation. I'm trying to get better at it. And so I have a senior admin person that we're trying to train a little bit more in sort of the onboarding of employment offers and kind of getting people enrolled with their benefits and things like that, and just some admin tasks that don't necessarily need to be done by me. And so just trying to work on getting that off of my plate.
I like that plan. We're working on figuring out what does not have to go through you. Jesse, I will touch on this quickly. I would imagine that there is some complexity to having employees across state lines.
Yeah, it's like really the bane of my existence. It's terrible, and I don't recommend anyone do it. I wish I could say, Nisha, that was very nice of you, but I have some stuff written down. I could really be more organized and procedural. But yeah, I working across state lines has been such a headache. I'm still learning things every single day that aren't correct and I need to fix. So that's been really hard. And finding a payroll servicer who will pay employees who work across state lines in the same pay period is also a headache and unfortunately not easy, and have learned this the hard way. And hopefully, maybe I could change my operation a little bit more so that the one employee I have more, and one person's working in New York and one person's working in New Jersey. But we will see. I was actually very shocked that this doesn't happen more often because I am 20 minutes away from New York, where our clinic is here in New Jersey. But I guess it's not that common, maybe because it is such a headache. So it's been a learning experience, and I'm still learning.
I would second that. We have a remote employee that works in California. It's sort of a long and unique story, but does exclusively our remote therapeutic monitoring and do not do any employment in California. It is a absolute nightmare.
I'm sorry for everyone on the call from New Jersey and California. Anyone else have that kind of like unique twist where you're right on the border and you have practices across the line or employees that go back and forth? No. Yeah, my two clinics are the same distance as Jesse's are, but I just happened to go into Brooklyn instead of Hoboken, so I was safe. All right, Nisha, your favorite topic, payment. So, oh, Kat was like that too. New York and Connecticut, similar to New York, New Jersey. Getting into payment, let's talk about let's talk about your transition of moving One Insurance out of network. I think that would be a good place to start. I think that was a really popular topic at conference.
Yeah, so we again have a pretty traditional model. We're actually about 50% Medicare, so maybe a little slanted in that direction. And we have a contract through an organization called Rehab Associates Network, and they have clinics within North Carolina and South Carolina, and you join the network, and they are essentially the holders of a lot of our contracts. So essentially, your network is bigger, you have better negotiation power, and so they were able to negotiate fairly decent rates with Humana, Blue Medicare, and a host of some other smaller work comp and other contracts that we had. But it's still low. Our Humana contract was about 90% of the fee schedule, or Blue Cross was, I think, 80% of the fee schedule. And I think we're all feeling it, right? Like it's just not sustainable at some point. And so in the payment, Kelly had just sort of offhand made a comment about when you're out of network with the Medicare Advantage plans that they have to pay you the traditional Medicare fee schedule. And I think I was multitasking and doing something, and my ears perked up, and kind of a wait, what moment. And so I had reached back out to her offline and got a little bit more information, and turns out that was accurate, and obviously went down the pathway of Spark and all the things that private practice section is putting out. And so we elected to discontinue our membership with this RAN organization, which we pay about $6,000 a year to be part of, and then attempted to negotiate separately with Humana and Blue Medicare and a host of these other contracts sort of independently, which was laughable at what they wanted to give us in rates. So we just decided, okay, we're going to pull the plug and we're going to go out of network. And so we're putting our foot down and putting our feet down. And so we are no longer going to do that. So we're kind of excited. I feel like from the principle of the matter, it needs to happen. I wish more people would do it, but I am in truth scared to death that it's going to kill us come January. So we'll see.
What's the conversation been like with your team preparing them for this transition?
Mixed. I think certainly our admin staff are excited because less nonsense with authorizations and restricted visits. And I think from a professional advocacy, I think our staff is on board. I've had some clinicians ask, what's going to happen to us, and sort of a little more nervous because we do have a fairly high percentage of those payers. We did it last year with United Healthcare, and it worked out tremendously in our favor. We didn't even feel a blip. We were just able to fill in all those slots with other payers, and it changed our revenue per visit about $5 a visit. And it had absolutely no impact on us whatsoever. So we're fingers are crossed. Please wish us well that the same thing happens in this go around with it. But I'm confident. Did a little bit of digging in our existing patients, and most of them are on PPO plans, which will include out of network benefits. Many of them are state retirees that are on a kind of a strange hybrid Humana plan, and it doesn't change any of their out-of-pocket costs. And so by and large, it's not changing a tremendous amount of the patient's costs. And then we've just really tried to stress like value in what we are providing. If it's going to cost them $10 more, that we're actually giving them $10 additional worth of, sort of value in the treatments that we're providing.
Staying on the insurance conversation, Drew, I'm going to have you share a little bit next.
So we're currently in network with everyone, weighing options. I don't have negotiating experience, just to be totally transparent. That's done by a different business partner. I'm eager to hear those stories of people going out of network. So we accept all insurances except Medicaid in our state, which we're gaining access to next year. And then longingly looking forward to going out of network with some folks. I've been tasked with doing a little bit of brainstorm early on if we have to go out of network, we stare the train down and we have to step off the tracks. How do we message that? How do we brand it? How do we make them understand we're still client-centered? We're not walking away from the patients. We're walking away from abuse, things like that. But very superficial, my experience with it so far.
How do you handle the admin side, with authorizations and, I think you said you have 6 PTs in
Correct.
your location.
6 therapists,
So
yes.
what's the ratio of admin support for?
So we have 60 visits a day is how I think about it at our site. When I'm thinking about the admin overhead and metrics and how much office staff. So have 2 full-time at this satellite location and I guess 20 more hours in addition to that. So 100 hours at the front desk. They manage prior auth and the mission is for us to get it to the ledger, if that makes sense. And then the central office to deal with any denials. I will say that's our goal. Sometimes we lean too heavy on the central office because they have just a ton of know-how over there. But our goal would be to have a true satellite clinic, have minimal staff at the front desk at each satellite, just enough to answer the phones, get everything done, everything scanned in, that sort of thing. And we do the prior auth in-house. Now, if there's major hangups with that or denials after it hits the ledger, that's done at the central office.
Okay. Before we move over to a completely different model with Jesse, does anyone have any questions or comments for Nisha and Drew? Anyone currently working on going out of network with one of their payers?
Do it.
We have encouragement. We're completely out of network at House of PT, and we still do. So we submit claims on behalf of the patient, so we courtesy bill. But we have our support staff is on here with me, but we're having the same problems with the authorizations, declining reimbursement, even on the out of network side. I think that's kind of when I was in Kelly's talk at conference, I was thinking about that a lot. There's this jump immediately from in-network to cash only, and I think we're kind of in the middle. And the out-of-network model is very similar on the admin side. Okay, Jesse, you want to explain a little bit of how you started completely self-pay and you provide super bills for your patients?
Sure. So I guess going off of your comment, I knew that if we were to submit bills for patients, that it would require a lot of administrative support. And that was just something that I hadn't set up, especially starting as more of like a side hustle. I wasn't hiring someone to do this for me, and I didn't feel savvy enough myself to do it by myself. So I decided that we would start with cash, and my software that I use, my EMR, provides that super bill just automatically uploaded to their portal. So, patients have access to that as soon as I finish their note. We, I think, have the privilege of being in an environment here where people are very used to seeing out-of-network providers or paying cash for their services. So it wasn't a huge shock. I also was very cognizant of the fee that we were charging, and I feel that it's a competitive price and probably more so to my detriment and need to raise it because I've been so resistant to doing so for years. But I think that also made it more palatable for patients to be like, all right, this is the price that I'm going to pay, and anywhere else where I'm getting a similar service will be the same, if not more. So that's kind of how it started. I think patients appreciate the transparency and knowing what they're going to pay. So the fee is the fee for that session. They're never going to be billed more for that. And whatever they get back from their insurance, if anything, is just reimbursable to them. So I think that that is also something that's good. We're also a niche practice where we specialize in pelvic health. This is a specialty that I think patients appreciate the time that we spend with them. We spend a full hour with each patient. And so I think that they see the value in that and are happy to pay out of pocket and then, hope for reimbursement later. So that's kind of, I think we're lucky in that sense that we're able to do that because of all of those factors.
Is your plan of care or the frequency that you treat a patient any different than when you were working at an in-network practice?
Um, Yes and no. I think, sometimes in network practices, they do encourage you to see patients more frequently than maybe clinically absolutely necessary. So I think we have a little more flexibility in our clinical judgment, at least from my own personal experience. I don't think that every practice is that way. So some patients who, for example, see us during their pregnancy but have no symptoms or issues, like that person doesn't really need to come in every week. So we might see that patient biweekly, every few weeks, and then change our plan of care based on what's going on throughout their pregnancy. Whereas within network, it's hard because they put time limits on you. They may want you to see a patient 2 times a week, and it's just like not necessary for that patient. Then you run out of the visits, and then what are you doing at the end? So it's I think we have more flexibility and we can tailor our treatment and treatment plan to each patient's case and their own needs and desires. So I think that we do have a little bit more room to play with that.
I wanted to point that out because I think sometimes with the shift out of network or completely cash, the patient feeling the full cost of the visit, sometimes they're not coming 2, 3 times a week, and there are these balance points that happen because then you're seeing the same number of visits, you're just seeing different people throughout the week to fill your schedule. So I just like to point that out because I think at House PT being out of network, it's pretty similar as far as we're seeing people more like 1 to 2 times a week instead of 2 to 3 times a week because the patient is paying a higher fee. Any questions on the out of network or any questions specifically for self-pay? I only know one person in here. Kat, I'm going to call on you. I know that you are going to be a similar model as far as out-of-network self-pay. Do you have any questions or do you want to pop on for a minute? Okay. No problem. I know Kat is a pelvic health provider, so that's why I was trying to call you up. Let's move into leadership. So definitely my favorite. Craig was our guest expert for leadership in April, and that session is on our archive. So I'll pop that in here if anybody wants to go back. But Drew, let's start with you. What is your favorite leadership book, resource, or any advice on that side of things?
Yeah, I'm a reader, especially the leadership books. Entree to Leadership, Dave Ramsey was the one that kind of pivoted my thinking. As a healthcare provider, we all have the Peace Corps gene. We give of ourselves, set our rates low, bill, 75% of what we do, et cetera, et cetera. It was the first one that kind of made me understand, like, if I can approach this like a business, I'm going to be able to get my employees what they want, and I still should be able to get my patients what they need. And so that helped. But like I said, listener is a better way to say it these days. But Lencioni, Maxwell, Simon Sinek. If it's Spotify, you can probably predict the rest of my list. Probably just the heavy leadership names to know.
Love it. How many people here have read one of those authors. Nisha?
I think we have the same Spotify library. I tend to try to read things that I guess maybe border on a little bit of the self-help or the, personal development on some things. For anybody that is into sort of profiles and those sort of things, I'm sure like many on the call are, I'm a big capital D. And so some things that I, certainly need to work on are just a little bit more empathy and communication skills that are not quite as direct and quite as blunt. And so I certainly subscribe to anything Simon Sinek that can help me sort of have a little bit of a different approach to things. And another one I just read recently was Dichotomy of Leadership. It's Jocko Willink who did the Extreme Leadership book, but I really appreciated the dichotomy of leadership, and he talks a lot about sort of how to balance both of those things. How do you have empathy with your employees without being a doormat, or how do you hold people accountable without being a bitch, and things that just sort of speak to me as I struggle in leadership and just managing people.
Have you mastered that last one yet?
Not quite.
Jesse, I know you're not a podcast person, but what do
I'm
you?
not. And I will say reading is like my fave hobby. That's like my sacred me time before bed. And I read just fiction novels. So my listening and my reading time is more dedicated to outside of work topics that just help me like offload. When I was working, before I started my practice, I was in like a leadership cohort and I really loved the book Crucial Conversations. And I have used that just, oh my God, countless amount of times in my own personal life, in my practice. And I think that that helps a lot, especially with how to approach things with employees and other people in the professional sphere, networking, referrals, all of that stuff. It's not just about like, disagreeing with people, but more so how to structure conversations and how to guide understanding of others. So I really liked that one. But aside from that, I don't know. I think I say I'm a new mom, not that new anymore, but I still am in the young child ages. And so a lot of my free time is dedicated to baby things as well. So hopefully someday in the future I'll have more time to dedicate to reading and listening to leadership topics because I do enjoy it. But I got a fraction of time that I just use for myself.
I think that's probably a takeaway that we could all use of, shutting off sometimes and listening to maybe not only listening to business related topics. I mean, I am definitely a culprit. That's all I do. Any other good resources that anybody wants to throw out? Any favorite books? The one that I was trying to pull up, maybe we can send it out in the email after. Mike Osler did a session on the DISC profiles. I think it was in the fall. I found that really interesting. That was my first intro to DISC profiles. And I immediately did exactly what he said not to, and like tried to fit everyone into what I thought instead of focusing on myself. Okay, moving into operations. This year, the May operations call covered module 3 of the strategic contracting series. Did anyone go through that series? Has anyone watched that? Maybe not specifically module 3, but has anyone gone through strategic contracting? I did the first two. I didn't get to number 3. Okay. So I will find that link and share it with everyone. Nisha, what metrics do you pay the most attention to and why?
again, maybe mixed here as well. So we will try to kind of empower our patient care coordinators, have sort of their own metrics they're responsible for. So we look at just total visits and arrival rate. Our clinicians are ultimately responsible for units per treatment hour. That's kind of the big one we pay attention to from our clinical staff, and just managing their own schedules and charge diversity and things like that. And then from a business standpoint or from a leadership end, we look primarily at revenue per visit, and again, just kind of helps us keep track of what charge diversity is looking like.
Jesse, is it any different for you in your model?
Yeah, I mean, we're not really concerned too much with the units per visit. We know what we're going to get for each visit, but we're looking more at like caseload capacity, our visits per case, our arrival rate, and then I guess we do a little more qualitative stuff like continuing education, and that's not necessarily operations, but just measurements of good employee standing.
Drew, what about you?
We look at a lot of numbers. It's kind of from the top down. I am a numbers guy. I love numbers. So I think it's a bigger challenge for me to make it palatable for the employees. If you look at everything I look at and things we confront ourselves with on a monthly basis, which is, I think it's 40 lines at this point, 40 different metrics, that we're looking at each clinic site. So what do I key in on can be different. Looking at that much, I think the upside is you can be tuned in to what may be off at the moment, right? Tuning it before it's way, way off key. But I look at arrival rate, visits per episode, so visits per eval in my clinic has been a struggle, and it's not for all of our clinics. It's specifically for mine. We're real progressive. We discharge people early, but then if you look at it, our outcomes don't match necessarily. If we did 2 more visits, the outcomes look better. And so picking up on stuff like that through all I look at, arrival rate, visits per episode, and then from a how's the clinic doing, visits per day is a very quick and easy. I know what it's going to look like if I know how many we saw.
I saw Don's eyes light up when you said that you're a numbers guy and you look at every number. I'm curious, how do you connect that so that it tells a story? And you kind of mentioned, how do you talk to your team about it?
So we have a dashboard for each clinician. We learned a while back that you don't want to ever seem punitive in a hard conversation. We do reviews yearly, but we have more talks than that. We have therapist meetings monthly. There's a lot of communication. They know where they're at. So if we're struggling, so a lot of times they'll bring it to me. Hey, my arrival rate's down, but it won't stay there. Things like that. So we push the key metrics, productivity and stuff like that, out to the therapist. They're looking at it. And then from a monthly perspective, like our NPS, our Net Promoter Score was horrible last month at our specific site. And I get email notification of every single detractor that comes through the clinic. Well, I looked at each one of them and teenagers don't even know how to do that thing. There's all the rationalizations. But compared to the big data, we kind of stunk. Every single one made sense to me as far as it's not a problem. We didn't miss the customer service target, but it was okay, well, this is elevated in the last quarter to a level where I got to tell all the therapists. And it's just, hey, let's shift our focus to this NPS stuff. There's fire somewhere because there's too much smoke. But again, the communication was, this is not an alarm. This is hey, we need to focus in on this because I'm seeing something that you can't necessarily see individually.
So you're looking at it more as an indicator of what needs your attention.
Correct.
I'm curious, you kind of mentioned on the communication, what is your meeting cadence like?
Mm-hmm. So we have quarterly all staff. We're kind of a division in that we've got 2 McMasters. I've got another business partner that runs that one, so I'm not in it day to day. But we bring both of those sites together quarterly because we're 20 miles apart. We don't share a lot of staff, but we do share a brand, and so we want to keep that team building. Our Our Christmas party is this weekend. It'll be all of us together from 2 sites. So that's every 3 months. Therapist is monthly. And then annual reviews are yearly. Honestly, to me, that's a fun time because we're giving raises. We always say if it's going to be a bad review, you'd know it before we enter the meeting. But those are our rhythms.
So you're meeting with everyone on the team monthly.
Yeah, I'm practicing right beside him. I mean, there's a lot of communication that just happens.
Nisha, earlier you mentioned quarterly meetings with your partner and with your consultant. What about with your team?
Team is a lot more frequent. We spend a very long time on onboarding. So we have a very structured mentorship that we do with all of our clinicians when they start. It's 6 months long. The first month is really based on kind of administrative things like that. It's billing, it's making sure documentation is key. We spend a lot of time co-signing notes. And then introducing them to KPIs. Many of them, because of our mentorship program, we hire a lot of new graduates. And so, of course, if any of you tend to hire new graduates, many have very low literacy of, KPIs and business metrics and things like that. So we spend a very large amount of time doing some education and coaching on that, with the primary focus of tying every single KPI to patient care, and really trying to not necessarily get away from the metrics, but making them understand we're in a one-on-one practice. And so making sure that if that's the model that we're hoping to sustain, that these business metrics are really important. And so we just try to tie every single thing we can into patient care. And I think that tends to get them a little more buy-in than, business and math. I'm a numbers nerd too, but nobody else is. So I try to really stick to that mindset of patient care. And so at the onset, we meet, twice a week hourly, and then that kind of phases out. But then just with our general staff, we do twice a month huddles. So we'll do a KPI huddle once a month. Then we do another compliance huddle once a month. And so those are just 20-minute blocks. We generally will pick one KPI. And then we kind of discuss who's rocking it out, who's not, and maybe just some strategies, really trying to not make it punitive either. We do a weekly dashboard as well. So it's pretty transparent. They too know exactly how they're performing. They usually will do the same, come to us and like, oh geez, my visits really crapped out last week. I'm trying to do this and I'm trying to do that. And so in our huddles, they will bring their dashboard, and then based on the KPI that we're discussing for that month, we just ask for kind of like one action item. What's one behavior change you can make tomorrow to just see if you can't drive that metric, up or down, or depending on which way we're trying to go with that metric.
So both of you are using a dashboard. Anyone else on the call use something similar? Or anyone have questions on what that looks like? Quiet. Everybody's eating lunch. Okay, marketing hopefully will wake everybody up. Jesse, let's start with you. What is your primary referral source? How do most people find you?
So I would say my primary referral source is word of mouth, especially here in Hoboken, which is where we spend most of our time in New Jersey. There is, some people call it the Hoboken Mommies Mafia, but it is a very tight-knit group of new moms and moms in the community. And they have a Facebook page. And if you've made it onto Hoboken Mommies Facebook, you've made it. But I do think that we have a really good reputation with the mom groups here in Hoboken, and that's like a huge part of our patient population. We also have made connections with local fitness instructors who I think are also trending towards the prenatal postpartum population. So we kind of help each other out, and that's kind of a way for them to send patients to us. And there are a couple of OBGYNs here. I haven't personally been able to make like a personal connection with a lot of them. But patients from their practices do find us somehow. So I think whether it's through word of mouth, or maybe we've dropped off some brochures at the office and they happen to be sitting up at the front desk or somewhere, we do get some patients from there. And then in the city, I would say a lot from physicians, and our office there is in like a co-working space. So we have a couple of rooms just in a larger space that has acupuncturists, massage therapists, a chiropractor. And so we do get some referrals from that space, the other professionals there in that space as well. And then just people who I connected with early on in my career, like doctors. So it is a mix, but here in Hoboken, I would say is mostly word of mouth.
It sounds like networking, a really strong network.
Yes. And then there's the occasional social media, which just shocks me, but we do get occasional Instagram, one from TikTok, which I was very surprised because I'm not a TikTok person really, but we did make a business TikTok, unfortunately. So yeah, we do get some from social media.
The amount of effort that goes into social media for how many patients actually find you there is insane.
Mhm.
Drew, what about you? Are you a TikTok star?
Um, if you can tell by the unnatural nature of how I talk in front of a camera, yeah, no. I've done some professional campaigns, social media stuff. Measuring the ROI is kind of what y'all are touching on. It's so hard to even know if that's where you got it in a clinic our size. So marketing was guerrilla marketing for me. Six years of falling forward, followed by 4 years of seeming like, oh wow, this worked. I just didn't know that for 6 years, you know. So 4 years of reaping the benefits of knowing some of the doctors in town. They call us a big little city. I feel like we're a big little practice in on top of that. So it's the Wild West with referral sources coming to town. And first one in usually wins. Well, I've done pretty good at being the first one in. Get used to rejection, go to the front desk. You're not old enough to own a PT clinic. I started parking where they couldn't see my car because I don't have a nice car. I don't need them to see that. You know, handwritten letters have been a huge thing. And then, you know, self-referral has slowly crept up. It's listed like a physician on the reports I read. And a couple years back, it was fifth highest referral source. So like we've built that over time, direct access, self-referral. But to me, that's kind of icing on the cake. It's wonderful. I don't want it to stop. It's hard to figure out how would I attack that and try to get a bunch out of that when if I can just beat the bushes and get another doctor to send us patients, it's immediate and huge when we do that. Does that answer it? It's really nebulous and guerrilla warfare for me.
Yeah. Nisha?
It's about 50% of our referrals come sort of traditionally through physician referrals. We have a practice liaison who is out really just kind of establishing relationships, less so with the providers, more with referral coordinators and admin, front office staff, since those are the ones really making the referrals and sending the patients on. It's very infrequently the actual provider themselves. And the other 50% is return volume. I think that's lent in part due to kind of our multi-niche clinic. And so someone may come to us for, a neurological condition and they see that, oh, we also do pelvic health. Well, my wife has a pelvic health dysfunction and our kiddo has scoliosis and I've got some jaw pain. And so I think our model sort of lends itself to having a lot of repeat patients just because we sort of advertise all the specialty care that we provide.
It's such an interesting setup. I've never heard anyone use the phrase multi-niche. It's almost like sounds contradictory.
Mhm.
But so in that case, you would have a patient who is returning, but they're going to see a different provider because they're coming for a different specialist that time.
Yep. And we really try to brand it that way or to kind of sell it that way that, okay, great, you're going to be with, Danny because she is an expert at pelvic health dysfunction and that we're really, trying to maximize the patient outcome with it and that it's not necessarily about me. I'm not, don't come see me if you are a kiddo or have pelvic health dysfunction. I will wreck you. But if you have Parkinson's, I'm ACEs for you. So we really try to sell it that way when we're explaining why you may not see that person. It's, this is really going to be in your best interest to see this person because he or she is amazing.
I love that. Super cool. Okay, so we got through 6 months and 45 minutes. I'm moving slow. Do we want to go into negotiation or innovation? So we talked a lot about AI on the innovation call. I don't know if we want to spend a lot of time on AI. I would prefer not to. Do we want to talk about what technology you have in the clinics? Maybe Drew, that might be an interesting one to talk a little bit about your tech?
Yeah, for sure. We kind of unique in that we use a small documentation system, not a widely known software system. But went to that in '09. There in Russellville, they can manipulate the code on it. So if we need a new button, they can add it. It's not overnight, but we actually build it out for ourselves, if you will. Student discount on the software. You get what you want out of it. Built for outpatient PTs, that it's built by us for us. Documentation is super fast. When you get into the AI and all that stuff, I'll briefly touch on it, but we'll be late adopters, but I cannot wait. Keep me off my keyboard. That would be wonderful. Listen in and help me out. I already use ChatGPT to start the email and then I'm finishing it, right? So I welcome that. The technology, because it's small in size of software company, we're behind in the text messaging, reminders, all those sorts of things. We're looking to roll out RTM. So Nisha, I want to pick your brain at some point. We're moving towards all of these things, and sometimes all the benefits that we get out of our technology also side effect is it holds us back because we're not with a big web PT or something like that. So we're not first to it, but we take advantage of all the technology.
Jesse, what about you?
So we have, our EMR. I actually really like it. We use PT Everywhere, which is really nice. And I think it is kind of more focused like for younger people to navigate, maybe. I don't know. I just feel like the patient interface is very intuitive for people who've grown up on technology. One thing that I love about it is we can upload our own videos to the HEP, and they have the HEP just right with the EMR, so everything is in the same place. And I like having our own videos on it. I think that's kind of nice, and I'm a bit of I don't think perfectionist is the right word, but like I'm very specific about how I like things done sometimes. So being able to film it myself and show exercises the way exactly I want them to be done is really nice. Um, and then we're a pretty low tech clinic. I don't really have a lot of gadgets here, but we do use ChatGPT sometimes when we are doing like a letter of medical necessity for patients if they're getting denials from their submissions of the super bill. So that's been a really great tool to use for that because it's quite effective and easy. So yeah, that's probably my input on that.
I think that's a perfect use for ChatGPT. And I want to point out for the other cash-based practices on the call, Jessie is still doing medical necessity letters, even though she's not submitting claims. We can't get away from it. Nisha, what about you?
Maybe a little bit of the opposite of Drew in this regard. We sort of laugh that we're often early adopters. We were prompt clients when they were a booth at the back of the, expo thing at PPS, and Weave and Sarah Health. And it's funny that we have often been, client number 2 with a lot of these tiny little companies, and then they, grow to be humongous powerhouses. So we're using quite a bit. Obviously, prompt has a lot of tech kind of built into it. The HEP is kind of built in that as well. You can also upload pictures and videos if it doesn't exist within their library as well. There's some AI features with that, with some ambient listening and some dictation. I personally use Magical. It's just been around forever. I only recently had to start paying for it for just some predictive text on those things that you write 50 million times over and over again. We utilize Sarah Health for our remote therapeutic monitoring, and that's got a pretty easy integration. They're actually working on making that a little bit easier next year. By no means am I getting any kind of like endorsement for these companies, but they're looking on making some things a little bit more seamless. Again, my goal is just to try to get clinicians out of here as quickly as possible. And, again, being in the traditional network, and, we're pretty compliant company. I have Robbie Leonard on my shoulder most of the time. And so we really like to make sure we're doing everything the right way. Again, we're one-on-one, so we can't afford to have a ton of denials, and we can't afford to pay a bunch of things back. So our documentation has to be sort of pristine, but I also don't want our clinicians sitting here all night long writing notes for no reason. And I generally use ChatGPT just to make me not sound like such a bitch in emails. That's generally what I use it for. It
Another
softens,
good
I say,
use.
make this nicer, and then I paste it in there. And it often is much nicer.
You know, I have never been concerned about if I sound nice in an email. I need to go back and read and see if I'm being too direct. Maybe I'm being bitchy in my emails.
I think
Um,
I'm the opposite. Need to type in be less nice in the email. Like I had too many exclamation points.
okay, I missed a question in the chat earlier. Brittany asked, how does everyone's team react to seeing each other's information on the dashboard or when we're going through team meetings? So I don't know, Nisha, do you want to field that one?
Sure. Uh, I think because we do so much coaching on things and everybody is going through essentially the same onboarding and mentorship programming, the messaging is consistent. Every new employee is hearing the exact same messaging. The huddles are consistent messaging in there. So their performance is usually pretty similar. We don't, if we have somebody who's an outlier, again, they usually know they're an outlier. And so it's not shameful or embarrassing. Our goal is really just to see that our employees can kind of explain the variance if they have a weird week or a one-off week, and they just explain why. And sometimes it's completely outside of their control. If, you know, knock on wood, COVID's not getting too rampant yet, but if there's an outbreak around town and things like that, and we just see, a large number of patients falling off, then obviously they're going to have an outlier month on that. But I think because we really try to make the messaging non-punitive, it's not a punishment. Nobody's in trouble for it. It's again just trying to explain variances and can they make an action plan to just drive that number differently. But I think their performance overall is actually pretty similar, and so it's not. I don't think we really have A players and then really crappy B players. They're all, A minus players.
I thought you were going to say they're all superstars, but I'll take the A minus. We're being realistic here. Um, Before the survey pops up, it's going to come up any second. I'm going to ask the panelists to think of, one piece of advice or one takeaway that you have for the group. And I'm going to put January's registration link right in the chat because if you're here today, I want to see you on January 22nd. We have Karen Litzy, and she's going to talk about, so we're going to do a little something different with marketing. We're going to talk about how to get featured in the media. So Karen is also from New York, and she gets most of her clients from her features in the New York Times and Women's Health and all of these big magazines. So I think that will be an interesting spin on the marketing discussion. No more social media. Okay, Jesse, I'm going to come to you first. What's your one piece of advice?
One piece of advice. Well, I'm still quite new and I don't know. I think I would say like I have one little regret, not regret in starting my own business, but I think had if I were able to, I would have loved to have a little bit more of like a stepping stone to starting my own practice. So like working with another provider who had more clinical experience than I did and learning from them. Because when you start off on your own, you're just by yourself. Although I did have like connections and people to be with, but surrounding yourself with a good network, having mentors and people who you can lean on is super important. But if you do have the opportunity and you feel ready, which like you're not going to feel 100% ready, but if you feel ready enough to kind of take the leap, I think like it's definitely a worthwhile venture. Nothing is permanent. You can always make changes and you don't need to know 100% exactly what you're going to do from the start. So I have a hard time living in the gray area, but that's a lot of what business ownership is. And I think that's my biggest takeaway.
Yes, it is definitely a lot more gray than any of us perfectionists like. Nisha, what's yours?
I think as it pertains to just payment and reimbursement, I would just sort of encourage everybody to look at your contracts and just begin the step of just being curious of going out of network, at least with the advantage plans or the disadvantage plans, as I like to refer to them. There's just so many ways around it and so many ways that you can actually end up getting more out of it. And I think the only way we're ever going to move the needle is if just there's a collective movement toward, doing something about it. And I think the more we all sit around and accept it, there's never going to be an incentive for them to change what they're doing. And so I would just encourage everybody to at least start thinking about it and look into the resources on Spark. There's just so much out there, and I thought I had a good pulse on it, and there's just so much more available out there to learn.
Yeah, Spark and the strategic contracting series are in the chat if you guys didn't get a chance to grab those links yet. Okay, Drew, wrap us up.
What's up? I think one of my takeaways that took me a long time to wrap my head around is what has been successful for me was not complicated. It was just hard. It's almost everything. I'm held back because I don't have a lot of knowledge on it, or it seems complicated. I mean, for example, going out of network sounds complicated, and that's probably not complicated. If I read up on it, it's just hard and it's scary. And that is the thing that I've learned over time is I say this as a therapist all the time when I'm trying to get them to be okay seeing another therapist instead of the owner. I'm not special, it's not complicated. It's just hard, and it's time and effort.
Love it. Thank you, everyone, for being here today and celebrating the end of our first year doing Beyond the Treatment Table. I'm going to remind you, since we're off this month, 2026, the fourth Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern. I want to see everybody, and I'm really excited for the guests that we have lined up, and I want to see this grow. So thank you.
Thank you for doing it. We appreciate you.
If anyone has 2 minutes to stay on at the end, I'm just going to ask for your feedback quick. But everyone else, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.